What do I believe from my childhood? So that's number one. What do I believe from my childhood? Because remember, it's the false beliefs or the actual beliefs from your childhood that are false from God's perspective that have to be felt before you can release them. Now, the thing that's preventing us from releasing these false beliefs is our addictions. So the second question is, what do I do to avoid feeling the childhood belief? Can you see the relationship? So here is, what do I believe? And be honest with yourself. It's, this is a personal exercise. It's pointless trying to tell yourself, I believe God loves me, when the feeling inside of you is, I believe God hates me. So write down as many that you come to your mind. What do you believe about your mum really? What do you believe about your dad really? What do you feel? What did you feel from them really? What do you think you felt from them? It doesn't matter if they actually did it even. What was the result inside of you that caused you to feel these particular things? Allow yourself to be honest and truthful about them. What do I believe from my childhood? And what do I do now, basically, to avoid feeling that childhood belief? So let's say, I believe that I'm always alone, might be one of my childhood beliefs. Because when I was a child, I was always left alone, and nobody ever took any notice of me, nobody ever listened to me. I finished up reading most of my life away when I was a child. I hardly had any friends. I was always alone. So that might be my belief. So what do I do now to avoid that belief? Avoid the feeling of it. So what do I do now to avoid feeling alone, in other words? Does that make sense? And you might find yourself that you spend a lot of time in people's company, you go out to watch movies, you play video games, all of these things to keep you busy, keep yourself busy, you do a lot of exercise, just to avoid the feeling of being alone. Does that make sense? And when you look back at your life, you might find, in fact, while you felt alone as a child, you might find that as an adult, you've never been alone for longer than a day. Many adults find that. They've left one relationship and within a day they've found another. Often it's that intense that we go from one relationship to another, to another, to another, to another, in moments, just to avoid a feeling. In fact, some people tee up the next relationship before they leave the last one. In other words, they get the next one started before they leave the last one, so they don't have to feel alone in between. Right? So we need to ask ourselves these two questions, I feel. And what I would love to discuss with you the next time you and I get together, which will be Wednesday, probably, is I would like to discuss these two things, what you found out during this process. See here, these, I would put in brackets as to what these are. These are your addictions. Does that make sense? They are the things that you've created in order to avoid these things, these painful things. So the first one's the beliefs, and the second one is the addictions, basically, that help you avoid feeling the truth of that belief. And when I say the truth of that belief, what you believe to be true inside of yourself. So many of you believe inside of yourself that you're worthless. So what have you done to avoid the feeling of feeling worthless? Right? For some of you, it would be, I've projected at every man, because my feeling of worthlessness comes from my not having a father. I projected at every man, find me sexually attractive in order to validate me. That's one of the ways that I get my feeling of worthlessness overcome. Does that make sense? So that's my addiction. My addiction is project sexually, get a sexual response. Now I feel valid. I don't have to feel that my daddy didn't love me. I feel all men love me. That's the feeling, right? And I'm bartering, I've got these addictions in play. Most addictions, by the way, are codependent. You've heard of that term? That means that you're doing something to please someone else and getting something in response back to you. Most addictions form a codependencies. Okay. Good day. So do you reckon you can have a stab at that exercise? Remember, the underlying goal of this exercise is to show you what is covering over your childhood belief systems. So if I drew a little map of that, basically this is what it looks like. Here are your childhood beliefs that you do not wish to feel. These are also, you could classify as your fears. Can you see that? You could classify them as your fears. And over the top of that, to stop you from having to feel those, you've created a whole set of actions, thoughts, people, places, things, and I could list many other things which we'll go through when we start talking about our addictions, to suppress, double P, the having to feel those emotions. And these are called your addictions. So in other words, you created a whole series of addictions, and their purpose, their primary purpose of all of your addictions is to suppress or push down the emotions that form your childhood belief systems that are painful. Does that make sense? That's the purpose of them. So the addictions are suppressing your childhood beliefs. So if we're going to unravel this process that occurred in our childhood, we're going to need to feel about and acknowledge and even be able to intellectually identify, probably before we acknowledge, if we can intellectually identify these childhood belief systems and start to feel them, what do we find then? We start to feel the reasons why our addictions got created. And once we start seeing the relationship, we can start going, okay, here are my childhood belief systems that I do need to eventually feel. But what I need to do is also see what addictions that I've created that push them down from being felt. The things that control them from being felt. The things that help me avoid them being felt. Right? And once I understand the relationship, I can go, okay, here's my addiction in play again. So I might be out doing something, here's my addiction in play. Like, let's look at a very simple addiction. Most of the time I might feel cold. That's the childhood feeling. Right? Just cold. I always feel cold. Always feel cold. That's my childhood feeling. What do I do now to make this cold go away? I turn up the air conditioner to 80. Right? My whole family complains. It's all too hot in here. It's all too hot in here. No, it's not. It's comfortable. There's all these family-based arguments about the fact that I've got the air conditioner turned up. Just a simple addiction to get over this childhood feeling that you're cold. Just one simple feeling. What does cold make you feel? Fear and alone, and a lot of other types of feelings, right? That's why you turn the air conditioner up. That's why you got it set at 80. Right? And you'll start seeing that there's physical things you do, there's emotional things you do, there's spiritual things you do, there's sexual things you do in order to avoid these childhood feelings. And you'll start seeing the relationship then between them. And what we're attempting to do through this process is deconstruct the process that was created so that we can at least start to get to the feeling of these childhood beliefs. That's our goal, to eventually feel them. We want to feel them because if we don't feel them, we will never release them. So our whole goal in this process is to try to get to feeling them. You're not going to be able to feel them initially because you've got all of the addictions pushing down the feeling. Does that make sense? But we've at least got to identify some of these childhood belief systems, these childhood feelings, and what we do to keep them under control, to keep them under wraps. We've got to do that. Because if we don't do that, what we're going to do is never feel them. And remember, you grow by releasing the thing, and the only way to release it is by feeling it, and then a new feeling can enter you. Or a new truth can enter you. Or new faith can enter you. You see, at the moment, as we listed, even our faith is all upside down at the moment. We've got faith in everything that God says is untrue, and faith in nothing that God says is true. And the only way to deconstruct that process is by feeling some things. We're going to have to feel what is the untruth that we believe is true. And the only way our faith will change is by feeling something. We've got to understand everything is going to be solved through feeling something. At some point we've even got to get to that belief. At the moment, most of us don't even believe that. Can you see? Most of us believe you feel something, you're going to get in trouble. Feel something, dangerous. Feel something, it's going to get hopeless. Feel something, it's going to go over and on forever. Feel something, that's our beliefs. So let's know what those beliefs are, and let's look at what we do to keep those beliefs from being felt. What actions we take. Just simple actions to complicated actions that we take to avoid the feeling. Does everyone see the relationship? So I'm sorry to labour that point if I was labouring it for you, but I wanted you to understand why we're going through this process and why we're trying to go through this process. This is a process that Mary and I do every single day. Right? Every single day. We go through this process of looking at what our childhood feelings and beliefs are and looking at what addictions we have that suppress that. Because then we can start deconstructing our addictions, and once we deconstruct our addictions, what's going to probably happen? The feeling will just come up naturally. The feeling will just pop out because we've deconstructed enough addictions to enable the feeling to come out. While you're living in your addictions, no feelings will come out. It's a very important thing to understand. While you're living in your addictions, no feelings will come out. So the only way to have feelings come out, and remember that it's the feelings coming out that heal you. The feelings coming out change you, so you have to have feelings coming out before change will actually happen. But the only way that is going to happen is by you deconstructing the addictions enough so that the feelings can just pop out. Just like that. And it is just like that oftentimes. Like you can go on for months and months and months deconstructing addictions, and you think, wow, this is not getting me anywhere. I still feel much the same thing. And then all of a sudden you're bawling your eyes out and you don't have any idea why. And then, a day later you feel completely different. And that's generally how most people experience change with regard to accepting God's truth. Does that make sense? The feelings just pop out when you've done enough work to look at your addictions. Now, can I point out to you why this is the case? Your addictions are the exercise of your will to deny. That's what addictions are. Addictions are the exercise of your will to deny your childhood emotional experiences. So can you see why it's so much a part of receiving God's love? If you're exercising your will to deny, and God's love is trying to expose rather than deny, can you see you're exercising your will in direct opposition to what God's love would do? That's why we need to come face to face with our addictions at some point. Because our addictions are the exercise of our own personal will in a direction that's completely opposite to growing in love and truth. It's the way we're saying to God, no, I'm not doing it your way. I'm doing it my way. This is my way. This works. I know this works from my past experience. I'm not changing. And there's the exercise of your will. The exercise of your will. There's your prayer. Your prayer is, don't you change me. I know what's right. That's your prayer. That's your actual prayer. Remember, it doesn't matter what you think you're praying. What matters is what's coming out of your heart, your soul. And if what's coming out of your soul is, no, I want to maintain these addictions because they're the only things I believe in, then that's what's coming out of your soul. That's the prayer that God hears. God hears, you don't want to confront your childhood emotional experience. So God says, no worries. I'll try and find some alternative way to help you confront your childhood emotional experience. Right? And God constructed a whole heap of laws, law of cause and effect, law of attraction, many other laws, all to help get to your childhood emotional experience. And now you've got to rely on all them. And most of us don't even rely on them. We're trying to avoid them too, right? So this is what we need to understand, is that our addictions are the exercise of our will to deny. So the more you can reduce your addictions, the more you're expressing your will to no longer deny. Eventually it becomes such a big prayer within you that you notice them very, very rapidly, and they disappear because you're willing to feel what created them very rapidly. Eventually that's what happens. But it's not going to happen without you changing the direction of your will. And that's why I suggest to go through this process. It's a process that Mary and I go through, as I said, all the time. We're just constantly looking. We know that whenever we exercise our will to deny, that's what restricts our growth.